It's time for your tippity taps. I'm gonna bippity bap all over your little toes now.
Hey, Carlos.
Yes,
Don't touch me.
darling, but it's time for your tippity taps. I can't stop flipping these flaps and giving you a bunch of little turtle taps.
On the evening of December 10th, 2021, a worrying combination of atmospheric conditions would lead to a devastating outbreak of tornadoes across the Mississippi and Ohio River valleys. Its consequences would shake the region to its core and leave everything in its path unrecognizable. One of the tornadoes in this outbreak would be particularly devastating, leaving untold devastation, injuring hundreds and claiming the lives of 57. An unseen monster masked by the darkness of night. Today, we discuss the Mayfield tornado. The morning of December 10th seemed no more exceptional than the days prior, aside from some unusually warm and pleasant weather for what was supposed to be winter. Many residents were carrying on with their daily activities, preparing for the upcoming holidays. However, unseen to the average person, the building blocks of a major disaster are assembling above their heads. A deep, upper-level trough is moving in from the west. As it crosses the Rocky Mountains, a surface low develops and starts to drift northeast. As it does so, unseasonably warm and moist air is being drawn in from the Gulf of Mexico. Dew points across the warm sector soar into the mid to upper 60s, with temperatures breaking records for December. This contributes to Cape values of 1,500 to 2,000 joules per kilogram. Winds in the warm sector change rapidly in both intensity and direction with altitude, leading to a strongly sheared environment. The intense wind shear and ample instability are forming an environment favorable for the formation of long-track, intense rotating thunderstorms called supercells. These storms can produce torrential rainfall, severe winds, hail, and most concerning of all, intense tornadoes. Noting the risk for severe weather, the Storm Prediction Center denotes a level 4 out of 5 moderate risk for the area, including the risk for strong nocturnal tornadoes. The environment is primed. All that is needed is a trigger. Storms would initiate in northeastern Arkansas and slowly organize as they drifted northeast. One of these cells would organize into a powerful supercell and around 7 p.m. produced its first tornadoes. Locals and storm chasers would observe several brief, weak tornadoes, including 2 on the ground simultaneously as the storm approached the south side of Jonesboro, Arkansas. Racing off to the northeast of Jonesboro, the supercell would produce its 5th and first violent tornado. The tornado would cause its first damage at 7:07 p.m. Central Standard Time, inflicting minor EF0 to EF1 damage early on before quickly intensifying to EF2 strength. The tornado then intensified to EF3 strength as it struck the city of Monette, causing severe damage, injuring many, and claiming its first life as the storm impacted the Monette Manor nursing home, causing significant damage to the structure. The tornado would continue to cause severe damage as it impacted the town of Leachville, Arkansas, and claimed another life as it destroyed a Dollar General. The tornado fluctuated in intensity as it crossed into Missouri before abruptly becoming violent as it approached the town of Hayti, causing EF4 damage and claiming 2 more victims, one of which was tragically a 9-year-old girl. The tornado would again become violent after crossing the Mississippi River into Tennessee, impacting the town of Tiptonville, where 3 more would perish. The tornado would claim its final victim as it impacted the town of Samberg before finally dissipating at 8:36 p.m. Central Standard Time after traveling for more than 80 miles and claiming 8 lives. This tornado, with estimated peak winds of 170 miles per hour, received an EF4 rating. Following this EF4, the storm began to cycle as it approached the Kentucky border. tornado would inflict its first damage near the Woodland Mills area before racing off to the northeast and rapidly intensifying as it crossed the border into Kentucky. On approach to Casey, Kentucky, the tornado became violent, sweeping many structures off their foundations and badly damaging the fire department. The tornado claimed one life and injured several others before exiting Casey. Damage here would peak at low-end EF4 intensity. The tornado continued its track to the northeast, carving in deep scour marks and trenches into the ground, indicating it was still extremely violent. The tornado continued to inflict significant damage as it drew closer and closer to the city of Mayfield, Kentucky, a city of more than 10,000 people.
The debris ball is now coming into Mayfield. Send some prayers to Mayfield right now. Let's keep our friends in prayer.
The tornado roared into the southwestern fringes of Mayfield around 9:25 p.m. at EF4 intensity, obliterating several well-built structures, sweeping their foundations clean of debris and shredding a candle factory to the ground with more than 100 workers inside, resulting in 8 deaths and numerous injuries. With it now clear that a violent tornado would hit the heart of Mayfield, the National Weather Service issued a tornado emergency. At 9:26 p.m., Mayfield was swallowed by the ferocious winds of the tornado. The twister directly impacted the downtown area, destroying several well-built multi-story buildings as it carved its way through the center of the city. Businesses and residences alike were swept away into the deadly vortex as debris was lofted to more than 30,000 feet into the air. 22 would perish before the tornado's wrath had finished with the city. Inflicting high-end EF4 damage, the tornado exited Mayfield and drew its sights on the city of Benton, where another tornado emergency would be issued. The tornado would ultimately spare Benton, passing just to the north of town. However, in doing so, the tornado closed in on the small community of Cambridge Shores. The tornado would slam into the lakeside community at 9:57 p.m., sweeping away many homes and inflicting EF4 damage before crossing into the land between the lake's recreation area and leaving a trail of deforestation in its wake. After crossing the lakes, the tornado began to close the distance to the town of Princeton, prompting another tornado emergency to be issued. The tornado would impact the south side of Princeton at 10:17 p.m., devastating the Golf and Country Club community where many homes were destroyed, with some being completely swept to their foundations. The tornado would reach EF4 intensity here and claim 4 more lives before exiting the town, carving deep cycloidal marks into the earth. The tornado then approached the town of Dawson Springs, again prompting yet another tornado emergency as the mile-wide wedge roared into the town. At 10:32 p.m., the tornado made a direct hit on the residential side of town at EF4 intensity, flattening entire neighborhoods and shredding buildings down to their foundations. An apartment building here would be dismantled down to just a few interior walls on the lowest level, and several industrial buildings would be seriously damaged. A photograph from one of the homes in Dawson Springs would be lofted by the wrath of the twister and was later found more than 120 miles away in Indiana. 14 would tragically perish here before the monstrous winds of the tempest moved on. The tornado continued on its track, impacting a few other small communities to the northeast of Dawson Springs at EF3 intensity, flattening or completely sweeping away many poorly built structures while rapidly closing in on the small community of Bremen, where the National Weather Service had issued another tornado emergency.
Emergency for Bremen, Kentucky. The National Weather Service in Paducah has issued a tornado warning for northern Muhlenberg County in south-central Kentucky, southeastern McLean County, until 11:15 p.m. Central Standard Time.
As the tornado approached the north side of Bremen, it suddenly intensified to near EF5 strength, obliterating several well-built structures and sweeping their slabs completely clean of debris. Trees sustained severe debarking and denutting. The ground was scoured. Several vehicles were thrown and the debris from slabbed homes were windrowed through the farmland by the violent winds. Footage of the monster tornado was captured by Eddie Knight as it passed just to his south. Continuing through Bremen, the tornado would sweep away several more homes, scouring the foundation and driveway. Several poorly constructed residents and manufactured homes would be completely destroyed and swept away as the tornado finally left Bremen, taking 11 more lives with it. The tornado weakened after leaving Bremen and would continue at EF3 intensity, impacting a few other small communities as it tracked to the northeast. The supercell began to cross into less favorable conditions as storm coverage increased and its inflow was interfered with. Tracking for roughly another 40 miles through a mostly rural area, the tornado began to gradually weaken before finally dissipating at 11:48 p.m. near the Rough River Dam State Park. By the time the sun had risen on December 11th, thousands had been injured and 95 had lost their lives. The Western Kentucky tornado made up a vast majority of the casualties at 57 and had traveled for more than 165 miles in roughly 3 hours, leaving catastrophic damage in its wake. The daylight would reveal town after town after town had suffered devastating losses. In one evening, an invisible horror had changed the history of this region forever. After surveying the damage caused by the Western Kentucky tornado, it was determined that the twister had peak winds of 190 miles per hour, earning it an EF4 rating. The poor construction quality of many of the homes in this region and the fact the tornado occurred after dark certainly contribute to the tragically high death toll, becoming the single deadliest tornado since the Joplin EF5 10 years earlier. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of this tragedy was the fact that many of the people in the path of the storm were well warned and were fully aware of the disaster that was roaring towards them. However, many had nowhere else to go and were forced to ride out a violent tornado in their homes. I can't begin to imagine the horror of knowing such a calamity is racing towards you and you have nowhere to hide. When a town is hit by a violent tornado, it's never the same again, but time can help heal the wounds. 6 months later, I would revisit the track of this historic tornado to find that nature had already begun to undo the damage brought by the twister. To my surprise, some of the homes in some of the hardest hit areas have already been rebuilt. However, most of the impacted areas are still reeling from the destruction and are going to need help with the recovery efforts for years to come. The path to recovery is going to be slow and many of the scars of that night will never fully heal. But with time and hard work, these communities can bounce back from that tragic night in December.
Know if it's gonna end too well for you. For the Gladiators music video.
I'm gonna win.
Woo! I'm gonna win.
He thinks, but I don't know, me and Talia make kind of a good team, so
I'm gonna win.
we're gonna be very mad at each other the whole day, but
I'm gonna win.
highly questionable. But I'm super stoked to have.
One thing I say,
Just
even after I
repeatedly.
beat you in that round, I just run around. I'm gonna win.
I'm gonna win.
I'm gonna win. I'm gonna win.
It's like toddlers. we just like that's the only thing that we know how to say to each other.
The villain doesn't even like actually speak to people. He just runs around saying, I'm gonna win, like Groot.
8
I'm gonna
a.m.
win.
Look, you keep saying it, but I don't.
I'm gonna win. 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 I'm gonna win.
Hi, stranger. My name is Rocky, and I'm a good boy squirrel. That's our squirrel, though. Hey, Rocky, calm down back there. Come on. Oh, my name is Joplin. You're 360. Your 360s are lame.
I see your wife with a man who is haunting, a man with a trail of bodies. Woo! I see a song of power.
Ralphie, don't you run away from me! Do you know who I am? Do you know who you're stealing from? I'm the Lizard King! No, it's not over there. Maybe it's, in the ground here? No! I can feel it! They're everywhere, Sharon, demon mice, they're in the walls. 1, 2, thrice. What's the price? Your life. Ah, done, run.
April 27th, 2011. Sirens are blaring across a small town in rural Mississippi as residents make their way to a local storm shelter. Cramming inside, the screams of the sirens begin to fade as a terrible roar gets louder and louder, drowning out the sounds of their panicked breaths as the ground begins to tremble. The strongest tornado in U.S. history has just entered their town. It's late April, and meteorologists at the Storm Prediction Center are scanning the atmosphere, looking for key ingredients needed for the formation of severe weather when they notice something concerning. A massive region of low pressure, called a trough, is moving across the United States. This giant, slow-moving trough is bringing with it a belt of extremely fast-moving winds aloft, while at the same time drawing in inconceivable amounts of warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico, bringing together a dangerous combination of atmospheric conditions. The mixture of warm, moist air with cold, dry air aloft is generating large amounts of atmospheric instability needed for thunderstorms called convective available potential energy, or CAPE. Additionally, the fast-moving southwesterly winds of the trough are overspreading a powerful, low-level jet of air rushing north, creating incredibly large amounts of both speed and directional wind shear needed to cause thunderstorms to begin rotating. Noting that all the ingredients for severe weather are now in place, the Storm Prediction Center issues a rare, high-risk outlook for severe weather, including a 30% outlook for strong tornadoes. By 1 a.m., a tornado outbreak was already underway across Mississippi and Alabama as unexpected lines of powerful thunderstorms called quasi-linear convective systems, or QLCS, moved across the area, spawning over 70 powerful tornadoes along with strong straight-line winds, causing widespread damage to infrastructure, while also leaving behind a dangerous thermal boundary draped across northern Alabama and Mississippi. As bad as things were, they were only going to get worse. As the sun begins to heat up the atmosphere on April 27th, meteorologists noticed that the storm system was even stronger than expected, prompting them to increase their outlook to an unbelievable 45% risk, noting, "A major outbreak of intense, long-track, and perhaps violent tornadoes is expected." However, none of them could have imagined the scale of what was about to take place. At 10:30 a.m., a cluster of storms erupts near Monroe, Louisiana, slowly gaining strength before merging together, organizing into a powerful, rotating thunderstorm called a supercell, spinning faster and faster as the clouds begin reaching towards the ground. Just after 3 p.m., an ominous-looking funnel hovers above the ground and within seconds reaches the surface. The newly formed tornado initially causes only weak damage as it tracks to the northeast, bringing down patches of trees and causing light damage to rural structures. However, just 1 minute later, the tornado rapidly intensifies, completely destroying a couple mobile homes and scattering the debris long distances. The strengthening tornado continues to cause intense damage to rural structures, flattening large swaths of forest as it races to the northeast at over 60 miles per hour. It's at this moment that multiple people begin recording the tornado for the first time as it approaches the small towns of Anchor and Dixieland. One of these residents, Jay Rogue, films the tornado as it approaches his location. With the roar of the approaching tornado only getting louder, the family decides to move out of the tornado's way. When they return, there's little remaining of their home. After sweeping away many homes at EF3 strength, the tornado races off to the northeast, leaving behind a visible scar in the ground. But unbeknownst to those in its path, the true power of the monster had yet to be unleashed. At 3:19 p.m., the National Weather Service issues a strongly worded tornado warning as the now large and extremely dangerous tornado is approaching the small towns of Okolana, New Wren, Amory, and Smithville, Mississippi. After crossing County Road 159, the tornado abruptly begins showing signs of extreme intensification, badly debarking trees and completely leveling well-built homes down to their foundations, with some being completely swept away. The narrow but violent core of the rapidly expanding tornado became so intense here that it even began to rip up the earth, creating a nearly mile-long swath of severe ground scouring despite moving at over 60 miles per hour. At this speed and size, this extreme damage is inflicted in less than 2 seconds. At the same moment, local resident Greg Lambert takes a photo of the tornado, revealing the monster wedge as it passes just to his north. 4 miles away on Highway 45 Alternate, 55-year-old Lynn Davis is driving south in his white pickup truck on his way to help his friend Tim, who suffered damage from a tornado earlier that day. While on the phone with Tim, Lynn begins to notice something strange approaching over the trees and utters a chilling phrase. "That looks like a tornado," before the phone call suddenly ends. A semi-truck driver driving directly behind Lynn watches in horror as Lynn's vehicle is peeled off the roadway by the ferocious winds of the tornado. Soaring hundreds of feet into the air, Lynn and his truck begin to orbit around the violent winds of the twister, trapped inside the tornado's grip in a cruel balance of forces as it begins to close in on the small community of Chapel Grove. Crashing into the community at peak strength, the tornado inflicts incredible damage to several well-constructed brick homes, completely sweeping them off their foundations, causing intense vegetation damage and scouring the ground. As the tornado moves past town, however, it suddenly begins to weaken, breaking the delicate balance of forces that have trapped Lynn Davis and his truck mid-air, and suddenly, Lynn comes crashing back to Earth, sadly killing him on impact. Lynn Davis's truck had flown an unbelievable 1.7 miles through the air before finally landing near the foundation of one of the destroyed homes, the furthest distance a vehicle has ever been thrown by a tornado. Over the next 10 miles, the tornado destroys several homes near the town of New Wren before finally dissipating at 3:39 p.m. just north of the city of Amory, Mississippi, claiming the lives of 4 people. However, something far stronger was brewing. As the first tornado begins to weaken, the parent supercell continues to track to the northeast, drawing closer and closer to the dangerous thermal boundary left by storms earlier in the day. Near the boundary, saturated air and backed winds will lower the storm's base closer to the ground and increase the already incredibly high low-level wind shear, turning an already historic atmosphere into what is possibly the most extreme tornadic environment ever recorded. If the supercell could tap into this environment, a tornado of unimaginable power would be released, and at 3:40 p.m., that's exactly what happened. Sirens begin to scream as the supercell merges with a smaller storm to its south, developing a new area of powerful rotation just to the north of the dissipating tornado. While this is happening, 2 amateur storm chasers, Camille Collins and Ashley Hurley, go outside to get a better look at the intensifying storm and begin recording the clouds. Within just a few seconds, the two begin to notice a strange-looking cloud passing directly to their northwest that begins rotating incredibly quickly. Moments later, a funnel lowers towards the ground. Hovering just above the surface, the tornado starts its life as a relatively weak vortex, doing little more than snapping trees as it moves along the Tombigbee waterway, but this weak phase is short-lived. The tornado's condensation funnel suddenly reaches the ground and explodes in intensity, drilling a narrow but incredibly intense swath of damage, removing several inches of grass and soil from the surface. At the same time, the now violent tornado crashes into a forest, flattening every single tree in its path, stripping them of their bark. It's at this moment, however, that something unexpected happens. As the tornado passes through the forest, its core suddenly collapses. Ripped apart by the intense wind shear, the tornado struggles, only inflicting minor damage to trees and low-lying vegetation as it races to the northeast. For a brief moment, it appears as if the residents in the storm's path have just dodged a bullet, avoiding the worst of the storm's wrath. However, this lapse in strength isn't going to last long. Just as fast as it weakened, the tornado strikes a delicate balance between the powerful wind shear trying to tear it apart and the unstoppable power of the storm's updraft trying to keep it together, and a tornadic core of incredible power crashes to Earth. Instantly, All the trees and vegetation surrounding the vortex are flattened and debarked as the core accelerates from EF1 to EF5 intensity in less than 6 seconds. At the same time, the winds inside the vortex become so strong and the pressure drops so violently that the ground begins to literally explode outwards, digging a trench in the ground over a foot deep and 170 yards long. Unbelievably, due to the tornadic core's fast-forward speed and relatively small size, this incredible feat of damage is inflicted in less than half a second. Racing to the northeast at a brutal 63 miles per hour, the tornado begins to set its sights on the small town of Smithville, Mississippi. 3/4 of a mile to the northeast, Tim Nix, along with several others, are frantically descending down the opening of a storm shelter when they catch a glimpse of the whirling gray mass racing directly at them. With just seconds to spare, Tim takes a photo of the approaching tornado before closing the door to the shelter behind him. Rapidly expanding and growing stronger with every second that passes, the tornado impacts the intersection of Davis Road and Highway 25, deeply scouring the ground and completely sweeping away 2 mobile homes as well as a bed and breakfast, granulating the debris into tiny pieces and scattering what was left long distances downwind. 3 people are thrown into the air as their homes disintegrate around them, 2 of which, a mother and daughter, are thrown into a nearby culvert and miraculously survive despite major injuries. The third, however, thrown from the bed and breakfast, is sadly killed, becoming the first person to lose their life to the tornado. At the same location, 3 vehicles stood parked near the bed and breakfast, a large RV and 2 semi-trucks. As the core passes, all 3 vehicles soar into the air despite weighing tens of thousands of pounds each. Flying for hundreds of yards, the RV and one of the semi-trucks come crashing to earth, deeply embedding themselves into the ground as unrecognizable husks of scrap metal. The second semi-truck and one of its cargo of 5 65 steel pipes, however, disappears into the tornado and is never seen again, ripped to pieces by the violent winds. Half a mile to the northwest, employees working at the Glover Wilkins Lock and Dam begin to film what they are seeing.
There. Man, that's just to the east of us.
Man, you ought to see this debris up in there.
The employees watch as the funnel morphs into a large wedge shape, moving incredibly quickly and centrifuging debris in all directions. The tornado has gone from a stout cone to a massive wedge in just 23 seconds. At the same time, 85-year-old Jesse Cox is sheltering in his home when the core overtakes him. The decades-old home is no match for the ferocious winds of the core and is completely swept away, with the debris granulated into tiny pieces, sadly resulting in the death of Jesse. The destruction had been so violent that the concrete foundation itself was lifted, chipped, and partially dislodged, along with completely shredding and debarking all vegetation nearby. Continuing to deeply scour the ground, the tornado begins to enter the main part of Smithville and encounters home after home, pulverizing each one in its path and claiming another life. Just ahead on Highway 25, Jimmy Cowley attempts to race ahead of the tornado in his truck, but realizes he isn't going to make it. Jimmy turns into a driveway as his windows implode around him. His vehicle is lifted into the air and tumbles as if it were made of plastic before crashing back onto the road. Miraculously, Jimmy survives despite receiving a severe laceration to his head from flying debris. However, many of those around him are not as fortunate. 3 more would lose their lives here as their homes are wiped away around them. At one of the destroyed homes, a red Ford Explorer SUV disappears into the vortex, becoming a deadly missile as it flies through the air. As the power within the tornado grows stronger, the compact but extremely violent core begins to inflict extreme feats of damage, completely sweeping away homes, throwing vehicles into unrecognizable balls of metal, and creating such a strong suction effect that curtains in nearby homes are sucked up between the ceiling and walls. Some of the most impressive damage, however, would come from the large trees growing along Highway 25. These trees, weighing several tons each, were not only completely debarked and denuded, but were violently ripped out of the ground and granulated into wooden splinters, leaving nothing behind but dirt-filled craters lining the road. More and more debris begins to fill the air, becoming deadly shrapnel to anything unlucky enough to be caught in its path. Homes, trees, and businesses alike all become sandblasted by these deadly high-speed projectiles as the storm barrels through town. Crossing over Main Street, a manhole cover and its steel ring are ripped away, leaving behind a bare concrete hole while the Ford Explorer continues to soar overhead. Half a mile to the east, a security camera at the Smithville Police Department captures the outer edge of the tornado as objects fly across the screen before the video suddenly cuts out. 3 more large, well-built homes are obliterated along Main Street, mutilating trees, scouring the driveways, ripping the plumbing out of the ground, sweeping the foundations clean, and scattering the fragments hundreds of yards away, claiming another life. Scattered across town, numerous people scramble underground or to whatever shelter they can find in the few seconds they have left. The ground began to shake as a deafening roar grew louder and louder. One survivor described the sound as if a giant hammer was pounding the ground over and over again, like a sonic boom that repeats itself. Crashing into a row of mobile homes, the tornado claims another life as it closes in on the Pearson family home, where Carla Jones is babysitting 3 children. With the deafening roar of the tornado quickly approaching and not enough time to make it to a shelter, Carla rushes the kids into the home's bathtub and lays on top of them in an effort to shield the children from the worst of the storm. Despite going to the safest place possible in the large 2-story home, no structure is capable of surviving what's coming. The entire home is torn down to the concrete foundation. Incredibly, the home's anchor bolts are ripped up and swept away, leaving nothing behind but a clean slab and completely debarked trees. The 3 children disappear into the vortex and are found 100 yards away on a nearby baseball field, severely injured but somehow still alive. Carla, however, is killed. She was only 37 years old at the time and gave her life to save the 3 children. Simultaneously, the red Ford Explorer that was picked up half a mile earlier along Highway 25 slams into the Smithville Water Tower, colliding with such extreme force it leaves a large 6-inch deep dent into the structure's solid steel frame before bouncing off and disappearing back into the tornado's grip. Spotting the whirling gray mass just seconds before impact, Michelle Wardlaw and her grandmother run across Elm Street for the nearest storm shelter. Unable to hear or speak to each other over the deafening roar, they watch in awe as cars, trees, and pieces of houses fly above their heads. Michelle and her grandmother are swept off their feet by the ferocious winds of the twister, but in an incredible stroke of luck, land inside the doors of the storm shelter, sparing their lives. Their neighbors, however, would not be so fortunate. As the tornado crosses into the town's eastern subdivision, it reaches its maximum intensity, inflicting tornado damage so extreme it seems inconceivable. Deep, extreme ground scouring carves into the surface as half a dozen large, well-built, multi-story homes are wiped off the face of the earth as if they had never existed. The tornado destroys the homes so violently that the debris was granulated into tiny, unrecognizable pieces. Not even a road is able to survive the terrible winds as the tar surface peels away into neatly compacted rolls. Of the 8 people in this area who didn't make it to an underground shelter, not a single one would survive. Like a knife carving into the landscape, the tornado crosses Monroe Street and reaches the Smithville Cemetery and Funeral Home. Gravestones are ripped apart and lofted as the entire brick funeral home is granulated so violently that the bricks turn into a fine powder. The only things remaining on the property are a bare concrete slab and craters where trees had once stood. Alongside the destroyed funeral home, a red husk of steel lay in a ditch among the debris and debarked vegetation. Unbelievably, This ball of steel was the red SUV picked up along Highway 25 that impacted the Smithville Water Tower. The truck had completed a mile-long journey through the air before finally landing among the devastation at the edge of town. Crawling out from the destruction, a man in town takes out his phone and begins to film the monster tornado. Its roar clearly audible from over a mile away. In less than 2 minutes, the entire northern half of Smithville was completely destroyed, leaving behind a hellish landscape and taking the lives of 16 people. But the tornado is far from finished. At 3:47 p.m., the tornado finally exits Smithville and begins to track through rural forested terrain, growing wider and wider before reaching its peak width of nearly a mile wide, flattening entire forests in its wake. To this day, these images depict some of the worst vegetation damage ever inflicted by a tornado. Darnell Colums, worried about her daughter Camille, the same Camille who recorded the tornado's first moments back in Smithville, steps outside and captures the violent wedge passing just to her west. This image is by far the most iconic image ever captured of the tornado. After crossing the Alabama border, the tornado's track begins to shift more to the east, putting the projected path straight towards the town of Hackleburg, itself obliterated by another EF5 tornado just minutes earlier. However, as the tornado approaches, a miracle seems to take place. The path curves farther to the north, sparing the already devastated town, but now moving dangerously close to rural homes northwest of the town of Hamilton. Running to the back porch of a home, Scott Smith films the tornado as it crosses over Interstate 22, passing dangerously close to his home.
We're watching one go across about a mile from us right here, right now. See debris in there. Y'all better take cover.
Although not as large and powerful as it had once been, the tornado is rapidly regaining both its size and strength and heading directly towards Highway 19. 2 miles to the north along County Road 157, Dave Forster begins filming the tornado as it passes to his south, revealing that within just a couple minutes, the tornado has already morphed back into a large wedge. At the same time the video is being filmed, a large family home along Highway 19 is directly struck and destroyed. 6 people tragically lose their lives in this single house alone as the walls collapse onto them. Racing through the rural areas at nearly 70 miles per hour, the tornado explosively intensifies, regaining its extremely violent core as it crosses and parallels Highway 20. Thousands of trees are completely debarked and flattened, with even the ground beneath them deeply scoured. No match for the violent winds, a collection of manufactured homes along with vehicles nearby disappear into the vortex as if they never existed, scattering metal fragments hundreds of yards away into the obliterated forests. Tragically, 51-year-old Rodney Abels is killed when his home is overtaken by the tornado. Moments later, his wife Sheila, who survived the Hackleburg tornado earlier that day, arrives home only to find a bare slab. Continuing to cause incredibly violent damage to trees and rural structures, the tornado remains over mostly forested terrain, avoiding the populated areas north of the town of Hackleburg before beginning to gradually weaken and finally dissipating 2 miles east of Hodges, Alabama, after being on the ground for nearly 40 miles. The tornado had ended, but the destruction had not. All across Mississippi and Alabama, dozens of tornadic supercells in the same volatile atmosphere produce hundreds of strong to violent tornadoes, including 3 other EF5s in the towns of Philadelphia, Hackleburg, and Rainsville, unleashing untold devastation and claiming the lives of 324 people. Back in Smithville, however, the scene was apocalyptic. Those that survived emerged into a barren wasteland with everything around them completely unrecognizable. 23 people lost their lives, while countless others suffered severe, life-altering injuries. The damage, however, was nothing short of incredible. The tornado dug deep trenches into the ground, threw vehicles miles through the air, obliterated entire forests, and completely swept away numerous well-built structures and granulated them into dust, doing all this while moving at over 60 miles per hour. This combination of incredible damage and rapid forward speed, along with existing in one of the most extreme tornadic environments ever documented, lead many to believe that Smithville is the strongest tornado in recorded history. "14 years later, the residents of this small town in northern Mississippi won't soon forget that tragic afternoon on April 27th, 2011. August 28th, 1990. The sky grows dark over the small town of Plainfield, Illinois, while thousands of residents carry on with their daily activities, completely unaware that just to their northwest, one of the worst tornadoes in U.S. history is racing directly towards them. It's a hot and humid summer afternoon in northern Illinois, and severe thunderstorms are beginning to build along the horizon. However, to understand why this is happening, we need to turn back the clock 24 hours. It's August 27th, and the ingredients for a potent severe weather day are beginning to fall into place over the Midwest. Meteorologists are scanning the atmosphere, looking for 4 key ingredients that lead to the formation of severe weather. These are moisture, instability, wind shear, and lift. Moisture is abundant in August across the Midwest as rich tropical air makes its way north from the Gulf of Mexico, causing dew points to rise into the low 80s. This extremely moist air, along with high surface temperatures from the summer heat, are creating an extremely unstable air mass with the amount of convective available potential energy, or CAPE, rising to an unbelievable 8,000 joules per kilogram, over 8 times what is needed for a thunderstorm to form. In addition to the explosive instability, a low-pressure system and cold front are moving in from the northwest, bringing in a broad trough of fast-moving winds in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, which are spreading apart or diverging over an area of relatively calm and converging winds near the surface. This difference in wind speeds at different levels of the atmosphere is called wind shear and helps to both force air near the surface to start rising and organizes a thunderstorm by tilting it on its side and separating the storm's updraft from its downdraft, preventing the storm from collapsing on itself and allowing it to persist for extended periods of time. With all 4 major ingredients for severe thunderstorms now in place, the National Severe Storms Forecast Center had enough confidence to issue a moderate risk for severe weather across northern Illinois for August 28th. However, there was still one crucial piece of the puzzle missing. Although strong speed shear was present in the atmosphere, the winds near the surface were not turning significantly with height. This gradual turning of the wind direction as we ascend through the atmosphere is called directional shear, and it's an important factor that causes a storm's updraft to begin rotating, a critical ingredient in the formation of tornadoes. With this important directional shear missing, the meteorologists at the Storms Forecast Center issued a severe thunderstorm watch at 1:30 p.m., anticipating a powerful line of severe storms to develop. However, because the atmosphere lacked significant low-level wind shear, they made no mention of the possibility of tornadoes. Just before noon near the Illinois-Wisconsin border, the incredible potential energy of the atmosphere could no longer be held back, and a cluster of thunderstorms exploded like a bomb. This cluster of storms would slowly drift to the southeast, producing damaging straight-line winds and large hail before one of the storms began to deviate from the others and quickly dominated the atmosphere around it. It's around this time, however, that something unexpected happens. The winds at the surface suddenly changed directions and began to blow to the northeast, increasing the low-level directional shear and transforming the dominant cell into a powerful rotating thunderstorm called a supercell, greatly increasing the risk for tornadoes. The momentum was building fast as this supercell developed a rotating wall cloud and produced a few brief, weak tornadoes as it passed between Rockford and Aurora, Illinois around 1:42 p.m. An already bad situation became worse, however, as the storm began to wrap its rotating updraft, or mesocyclone, in a thick curtain of heavy rain and hail called the Bear's Cage, hiding whatever tornadoes that may develop within, and at 3:15 p.m., that's exactly what happened. The newly formed twister started out as a weak F0, doing little more than damaging crops and open fields and periodically causing more concentrated damage as the subvortices dance within the parent circulation. It's now 3:23 p.m., and the National Weather Service office in Chicago, unaware of just how dangerous the situation is becoming, decide to issue a severe thunderstorm warning for the areas downstream of the supercell, but decide not to include any mention of the possibility of tornadoes. With that decision, those in the path of the storm will have no warning of the invisible monster roaring towards them. The tornado continues moving to the southeast, gradually building its strength when something remarkable happens. The tornado's parent storm may have adjusted a nearby outflow boundary, pulling in the spinning air that exists along the boundary and leading it directly to the tornado. Like spraying gasoline on a raging fire, the tornado exploded in intensity right as it began to close in on the subdivision of Wheatland Plains. The tornado would strike the small community at 3:25 p.m., displaying its terrifying power as it caused major damage to dozens of homes and completely sweeping away 12 of them, scattering the remains of the structures for long distances downstream. The tornado also claimed its first life here in addition to injuring dozens more. However, the tornado was far from finished with its rampage. As the tornado crosses 135th Street, it begins to shrink in size, yet as the tornado shrinks, the winds inside the vortex strengthen at a frightening pace, quickly becoming violent, and as the twister crosses West 143rd Street, it reaches its peak strength. The winds inside the core of the tornado are now roaring at over 260 miles per hour, easily placing the twister at the top of the Fujita scale, a rare F5. The now F5 winds of the vortex flatten hundreds of yards of crops and drill into the earth, causing intense ground scouring and tearing away several inches of the soil before exiting the field outside of the town at 3:28 p.m. Like a cloaked monster, the heavily rain-wrapped vortex crosses Route 30 in Illinois 126, picking up several cars and a 20-ton tractor trailer like toys before throwing them over half a mile away, killing their occupants upon impact. Weakening slightly to high-end F3 strength, the tornado then crashed into the southwestern side of Plainfield, closing in on the town's high school, where several dozen students had just run inside the gymnasium to take shelter after seeing the eerie green storm clouds of the approaching storm. As soon as the last student made it inside the school, the doors of the hallway they were sheltered in were ripped away with terrifying force as the roof collapsed around them. Remarkably, the hallway the students had sheltered in would be the only part of the building to survive the winds of the twister. Tragically, 2 maintenance workers, an administrator, and a teacher outside this hallway would be killed as the building collapsed around them. With brutal force, the core of the tornado then slammed into St. Mary's Immaculate Church, severely damaging the structure and killing 3 inside before mowing down dozens of homes and a grocery store with such ferocity that some were completely swept away with only their concrete foundations remaining. Trees here became so badly damaged that their bark was stripped off their trunks, and a video in this area revealed the winds became so intense that a steel dumpster was picked up and crushed beyond recognition before being wrapped around a nearby tree. The damage here was so violent that it earned a high-end F4 rating, and unfortunately, at least 9 people would lose their lives here, with countless others severely injured. There was a brief lapse in the tornado's strength as it exited Plainfield before it once again intensified back to F4 strength and set its sights in the city of Joliet. The invisible vortex smashed into the Crystal Lawns and Warwick subdivisions with terrifying fury, lofting vehicles into the air and destroying countless homes at F4 intensity as it narrowly missed the Joliet Mall, claiming 8 more lives. By 3:38 p.m., the tornado was now losing steam and slowly weakening, yet in a cruel final blow, the dying vortex strikes the community of Crest Hill, destroying several apartment buildings and sucking 8 people from their homes and hurling them into a nearby cornfield before striking a vehicle and killing 2 more. The rapidly weakening twister would damage a few more homes downstream of the apartment complex before finally roping out and dissipating at 3:45 p.m., 2 miles east of downtown Joliet. By the time the tornado had lifted, 29 people had tragically lost their lives, with hundreds more sustaining life-altering injuries and over 1,000 losing their homes. In the span of just 30 minutes, the invisible and unwarned tornado carved a continuous 16-mile path of destruction as it traveled in a bizarre southeasterly direction, causing over $375 million in damage and vanished without a trace, cementing its legacy as not only one of the strangest and mysterious tornadoes in U.S. history, but also the only F5 tornado to strike the United States in the month of August, leaving behind both physical and emotional scars that would take years to heal. However, as the devastated communities began to pick up the pieces, one question lingered in the minds of the survivors. As soon as the Plainfield tornado had lifted, questions about why there had been no tornado warning quickly began to mount among the survivors. Amidst the increasing public backlash, the National Weather Service would launch an internal investigation into its Chicago office to determine exactly what had gone wrong on the afternoon of August 28th. The investigation found that the critical failures that led to the Plainfield tornado striking without a tornado warning stemmed from the fact that the forecasters had failed to recognize the well-known signs that the storm tracking through northeastern Illinois that day was in fact a tornadic supercell, nor was adequate preparation or infrastructure put in place for the office to receive reports of severe weather from either the public or trained weather spotters. On the day of the Plainfield tornado, none of the funnel cloud or tornado reports that occurred prior to the Plainfield F5 touching down ever made it to the National Weather Service office in Chicago, nor was the classic hook echo shape of the parent storm visible on radar, recognized by the forecasters as the telltale sign that the storm was in fact a long-lived tornadic supercell capable of immense destruction. And ultimately, the National Weather Service failed the people of Plainfield that day. Yet, from this terrible tragedy came enormous progress. In the 33 years that have passed since the Plainfield tornado, things have drastically changed at the National Weather Service. In place of what was once a limited range of tools, training, and communication, has blossomed into a plethora of upgrades that let meteorologists peer inside a thunderstorm from both the skies above and the ground below. With the deployment of both an upgraded dual polarization Doppler radar and the use of an extensive network of volunteer storm spotters through programs like Spotter Network, Skywarn, and even social media, the National Weather Service can see exactly what is happening on the ground in real time and ensure that a disaster like Plainfield can never happen again.
The 2011 super outbreak is by far the most devastating tornado event in recent times, completely destroying dozens of communities across multiple states in the southeast. But one tornado is remembered particularly for the sheer impact it had on the people of Alabama. This tornado struck not just one, but two large metropolitan areas. This, of course, is the EF4 that impacted the south side of Tuscaloosa and tracked over 80 miles to Birmingham, Alabama. This is the story of the most infamous tornado in Alabama history. April 27, 2011 was predicted to have high-end parameters for tornadoes several days out. The day before, on the 26th, the Storm Prediction Center issued a high-risk outlook with a 30% hatched risk for tornadoes. But on the morning of the 27th, observed instability in wind shear, the ingredients that are essential for powerful tornadoes, were even worse than predicted, prompting the SPC to up the tornado risk to 45%, suggesting this day was going to be historic. By 2 p.m., a tornado outbreak was underway. Strong tornadic supercells in northern Mississippi are already producing strong tornadoes, including an EF5 in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Further south, another supercell formed, but it still needed time to mature. Other storms across the region began producing prolific tornadoes, but the storm to the south was still chugging along, moving into an increasingly favorable environment. James Spann and the ABC News crew are watching that storm very closely, noticing how the storm's path is going straight towards Tuscaloosa, the fifth most populated city in Alabama.
And again, that one's going to want to move in this direction. So I'm just telling you, if this stays on that same track, that's going to wind up in Tuscaloosa.
It's not long until those fears are realized. By 4:30 p.m., a tornado touches down just northwest of Union, Alabama. Damage is initially quite sporadic, with patches of trees being brought down. As the tornado crosses Wesley Chapel Road, only moderate damage is inflicted, but the tornado is rapidly intensifying as it approaches the small town of Foster's, Alabama. Fortunately, the only structure to experience the strongest winds is an old warehouse, but the tornado is quickly moving towards Tuscaloosa. The tornado was caught on camera by John Oldshoe, a storm chaser live streaming for ABC.
But his live stream is cut off as the tornado crosses Black Warrior River. The ABC tower cam then focuses on where the tornado should be. Through the haze and rain, the tower cam appears to show that the tornado has lifted. Seems like Tuscaloosa might have just dodged a bullet. Unfortunately, the tornado is only just getting started.
Look at the debris in that. Zoom in tighter, Jason, if we can go in tighter. Look at that. Goodness gracious. This will be a day that will go down in state history. And all you can do is pray for those people.
James Spann delivers an ominous message, communicating to the people of Tuscaloosa the urgency of the situation.
This is a large, violent tornado coming up on downtown Tuscaloosa. Be in a safe place right now.
The live broadcast shows the large, multi-vortex tornado quickly intensifying, taking on the shape of a wedge, a visual cue that the tornado is extremely powerful. As the tornado moves into the outskirts of Tuscaloosa, it clips the Liberty Recycling Center and a small community on Friday Circle, throwing shipping containers and damaging homes. As the tornado crosses this area, power lines are snapped, causing a power loss to much of Tuscaloosa. The tornado is now entering town. The exact path of the tornado is still unknown, but it appears as if the tornado is aimed directly at the University of Alabama, which is truly a worst-case scenario because thousands of students could be caught in this extremely violent tornado.
I don't want to be so specific with this one. Again, based on the size of this, if you are in the city limits of Tuscaloosa or on the campus of the University of Alabama, stay sheltered.
A man recording the tornado captures the moment a substation is struck, causing another massive power flash. Debris can be seen flying into the vortex as an industrial district is shredded into pieces. As the tornado approaches Interstate 359, Ryan Chandler films the tornado crossing just ahead where he had driven moments prior.
We don't know if this thing can change directions. We're not.
In this video, the tornado shows what is probably the most impressive display of horizontal vortices ever documented, and horizontal vortices are only associated with the strongest tornadoes. While the now violent tornado crosses the highway, a car on the interstate is struck, killing one of the passengers. This is the first fatality attributed to the tornado. At the same time, several people are sheltering under this overpass. One of the few taking shelter under the overpass is UPS driver Jimmy Jones, and by some miracle, he survived. Several vehicles were rolled and mangled, including Jones's UPS truck. After surviving a direct hit from the tornado, Jones takes this photo, showing the monster that had nearly killed him. After crossing the highway, the tornado was now moving into a residential part of town. A public housing complex, Rosedale Court, takes a direct hit. Trent Miner films the tornado as it's impacting Rosedale Court, eventually taking cover.
Dude, this is gonna hit us directly.
The lower quality construction is no match for the violent tornado. Much of the complex is leveled, sadly killing 9. The tornado continues its wrath towards Charleston Square Apartments. Trent fortunately survives the encounter, but tragically, 3 University of Alabama students are killed here. Melanie Mixon, 21, who is majoring in accounting, Marcus Smith, 22, who is studying management and information systems, and Ashley Harrison, 21, who is majoring in economics, finance, and legal studies. Ashley was only a week from receiving her degree in economics. Her body was found over 100 yards away in a field. Her boyfriend, Carson Tinker, a football player, was with Ashley when they took cover. Tinker survived with only a broken wrist, showing just how chaotic and random tornado deaths can be. 2 other Tuscaloosa residents, including a student at the University of Alabama, capture the moment the tornado overtakes Charleston Square Apartments, with each narrowly avoiding the tornado to the north and south. As the tornado continued northeast at nearly 60 miles per hour, more homes are struck. Video of the tornado at this time as it crosses to the south of the onlooker is one of the most incredible tornado videos ever captured, showing the immense power and size of the tornado.
Look how big that thing is.
This video also shows how the tornado had an extremely loud jet-like roar. Several more homes are destroyed at EF3 strength before the tornado encounters Forest Lake. The flat surface of the water allows the winds to intensify due to a reduced amount of friction. These winds rush onshore, violently striking and wiping out the large homes of Forest Lake Drive here Trees are reduced to splinters. The tornado now closes in on the intersection of 15th and McFarland Boulevard, a busy intersection on the south side of Tuscaloosa with several shopping malls and businesses. But also just to the north of the intersection is the DCH Regional Medical Center, the one place you don't want to get hit because an impact here will threaten the lives of many patients while also depriving the city of a place to treat tornado injuries after the storm has passed. Jason Rosolowski films the tornado from the University Mall parking lot. Unable to comprehend what he is witnessing, he continues to record, capturing what is probably the most iconic tornado video from this day. The tornado fortunately misses the Regional Medical Center just to the south. Instead, the tornado hits the homes in Cedar Crest, where the neighborhood is completely gutted, killing 3, including another student, Brandon Adderton, a 23-year-old studying economics. After crossing McFarland Boulevard, the tornado rampages onwards, destroying even more homes and businesses. The tornado races across the railroads, fortunately passing just south of the main University of Alabama campus. But the tornado is still destroying large areas of homes, much of which is student housing. One video taken by a student of the University of Alabama shows just how close the tornado actually came to impacting the university, missing it by only a few hundred yards. Had the tornado hit the university, countless more deaths would have certainly occurred. Fortunately, the university dodged a bullet. After passing just south of the university, the tornado is now moving towards the eastern side of Tuscaloosa, sweeping through Beverly Heights, killing 3, including another student, Danielle Downs, a 24-year-old who was studying social work. Inside one of the buildings on University Boulevard, Gomez Perez is filming the darkening skies while everyone else inside is oblivious to the approaching danger. Within seconds, all hell breaks loose as the core of the tornado passes overhead. The core of the tornado now approaches Chastain Manor, a residential apartment complex for senior citizens. It impacts the southeast corner of the complex, completely sweeping away the top floor of the entire east wing, scattering debris in the adjacent valley. To the south of the apartments, the clubhouse sustains even worse damage, as it is completely swept off of its foundation. Damage surveyors who analyze the path for clues into the true intensity of the tornado identify this location as the most violent section of the damage path. 3 different survey teams analyze the damage here. 2 of the teams conclude that the damage is high-end EF4. The 3rd team concludes that it was actually indicative of EF5 intensity. Outvoted 2-1, the damage in this area is assigned a rating of 190 miles per hour, high-end EF4. After impacting Chastain Manor, a mobile park home takes a direct hit from the core of the tornado, reducing 80% of the park to piles of debris. The homes on Elm Drive are the last building struck in Tuscaloosa, but it's still going strong. The tornado crosses Hurricane Creek, where there's a 100-year-old steel bridge spanning 570 feet across the creek. The bridge is held up by massive 35-ton trusses as the core of the tornado passes directly overhead. The trusses not only buckle, but are tossed sideways, including one which is pushed uphill over 100 feet. The rest of the bridge collapses into the valley below. The single point of damage cost the Alabama Southern Railroad nearly $5 million to repair.
Again, this is the storm that produced all the damage in Tuscaloosa. Large wedge tornado, a mile wide.
Even though the tornado had left the dense suburbs of Tuscaloosa behind, sparsely populated rural communities still exist in the path. The surrounding mature forest is shredded. Here, the tornado demonstrates what is perhaps its most violent form yet. Manufactured homes impacted by the tornado cease to exist, while a very large house south of the core is completely swept off of its foundation. On Recreation Road, several more homes suffer a similar fate. The National Weather Service notes another 190 mile/hour damage indicator, once again just shy of an EF5 rating. At nearly a half a mile from the center of the tornado, the Eagle Cove Marina on the Black Warrior River is subject to damaging winds. Several boats sink, while warehouses are shredded to pieces. Lakeside homes are scattered into the water, while a quarter mile to the south, homes are swept by the apocalyptic winds within the tornado. Since the tornado was now over less populated areas, there's a lack of any tornado footage. However, the KBMX Doppler radar is scanning the tornado at 2,000 feet above the ground, and now, at 520, the strength of the tornado reaches an apex. The sum of the opposite velocities, known as gate to gate, is 280 miles per hour, giving a rotational velocity of 100 340 miles per hour, tying the previous record held by the 2007 Greensburg, Kansas EF5. These values are telling. A structure does not need to be impacted to know that this tornado is incredibly violent. Fortunately, there were very few homes in this area. However, there are many mines that dot the landscape. One person who is currently working at a mine is James Johnson. At 5:24, he begins recording the tornado 7.5 miles to his west. While James is recording, a home is swept away into the valley, sadly killing Judy Sherrill. Johnson continues recording as the tornado closes in, now less than a mile from the mine in which he's working. In Johnson's video, the sheer power of the tornado is evident. It almost appears as if the entire mesocyclone of the storm has dropped to the ground. The thought of such a tornado returning to heavily populated areas is a complete nightmare, and unfortunately, this nightmare is about to come true. The tornado's sights are now set on the city of Birmingham.
This is coming right up here toward the Birmingham, right toward downtown Birmingham.
As debris begins to rain down on Birmingham, the tornado begins to move into the western Birmingham suburbs. Several homes in the Valley Creek community are destroyed. The tornado crosses 15th Street into the Oak Grove coal mine. Numerous large industrial structures are toppled, while dozens of storage containers are flung to the east. The tornado then moves into the town of Concord. In Concord, framed houses are demolished and occasionally swept away, leaving only bare foundations. At one swept home, a concrete porch is shattered and is shifted by the incredible winds. The next batch of homes impacted on 14th Street are more exposed at the top of hills. This lack of protection results in several framed homes to be swept off of their foundations, with their debris thrown into the valley below. The tornado then moves into the densely populated neighborhood, Pleasant Grove, a large suburb of Birmingham. Here, hundreds of homes are reduced to piles of rubble. And as the tornado crosses 11th Avenue, a 300-yard convergent streak of granulated debris is smeared across the ground in a process called windrowing. This damage pattern is only created by the most violent tornadoes. These intense winds are powerful enough to sweep and shift the foundations of even more homes in Pleasant Grove. Sadly, 5 more residents were killed here. Residents to the south in Birmingham record the violent rain-wrapped tornado as it tears through Pleasant Grove. This 1-minute period forever changed the lives of countless people. After ravaging Pleasant Grove, the tornado shows another incredible display of its strength. A collection of railcars, each weighing nearly 36 tons, are lofted into the air. One car is moved over 100 yards from its original position. The amount of power needed to throw a massive railcar is hard to imagine. The tornado's power is shown yet again as 2 large warehouses are completely swept from their foundations. However, the smaller core was now struggling to maintain itself, inflicting less severe damage to a water treatment plant and several warehouses. But still, the tornado refuses to die and surges back as the tornado enters the town of North Pratt and Smithfield Estates. Many homes suffer damage as the tornado crosses Highway 78. The industrial area of Hooper City is hit before dozens of homes have their roofs torn away. But as the tornado crossed I-22 and I-65, it was dying. The tornado musters up just enough power to inflict roof damage to a few more homes, but soon after, the tornado is gone. Even though the historic tornado had lifted, the storm that birthed this monster was still ongoing and would go on to produce several more tornadoes, including another long-track EF4. And that was just one storm. Across northern Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee, dozens of tornadoes were ongoing, destroying homes and businesses, while injuring and killing hundreds of people who were completely powerless in this situation. This day was truly a tornado apocalypse. In the overnight hours, the system that spawned these tornadoes would pass, and the chaos in the southeast would come to an end. A sick student, Morgan Seigler, would succumb to her injuries while being treated at the DCH Medical Center. The tornado had left 64 people dead, 6 of which were students at the University of Alabama. The tornado had also caused more than 1,500 injuries, many of which were critical despite not being fatal. In the days following this tragic tornado outbreak, President Barack Obama would visit Tuscaloosa to take a ground tour of some of the affected areas. Obama said he had never seen devastation like this and declared a federal state of emergency in Alabama.
And I've got to say, I've never seen devastation like this.
In total, the tornado was on the ground for 90 minutes, and during that time, the tornado caused a staggering cost of $450,000 worth of damage per second, totaling about $2.4 billion in damage over its entire path, surpassing the 1999 Bridge Creek Moore F5 as the costliest single tornado in United States history. But the record wouldn't last long, as less than a month later, this number was surpassed by the Joplin EF5, which caused an even more substantial $2.8 billion in damage. Aside from the damage caused, the other thing the Tuscaloosa tornado is remembered for is its frightening appearance. Multi-vortex tornadoes are tornadoes with pronounced subvortices circulating around the main vortex, and Tuscaloosa is the best tornado for visualizing this concept, as it had the most insane horizontal vortices ever recorded. This appearance is very indicative of a violent tornado, as it suggests high levels of vorticity aggregation, which helps strengthen and mature the tornado even further. The final rating of EF4 assigned to the Tuscaloosa tornado is still a source of controversy, as one of the survey teams suspected EF5 damage. But the thing is, just by looking at satellite imagery of this tornado, fully swept homes were few and far between. Personally, I believe this tornado had winds right around 200 miles per hour. If this tornado was ever solidly above the EF5 threshold, it likely happened between Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, because this is where there was the widest swath of tree damage, and also this is where radar showed the highest winds within this tornado. However, it didn't produce solid EF5 damage for one reason. At an average speed of around 60 miles per hour, it simply didn't have enough time to produce the highest level of damage compared to a slower moving tornado, which is much more destructive. Ultimately, the tornado was given a rating of high-end EF4 with winds at 190 miles per hour. The Tuscaloosa tornado will be remembered for a very long time, as it is clearly the defining tornado of the most prolific tornado outbreak in recorded history.
I am the prophet with the answers you seek. Time, I've unlocked it. I see past and future running free. There is a world where I help you get home, but that's not a world I know. What? I see a song of past romance. I see the sacrifice of man. I see portrayals of betrayal and a brother's final stand. I see you on the brink of death. I see you try your final breath. I see a man who gets to make it home alive, but it's no longer you.
This can't be. We've suffered and sailed through the toughest of hells. Now you tell us our efforts for nothing.
I see your palace covered in red, faces of men who had long believed you're dead. I see your wife with a man who is haunting, a man with a trail of bodies. Who? I see a song of past romance. I see the sacrifice of man. I see portrayals of betrayal and a brother's final stand. I see you on the brink of death. I see you try your final breath. I see a man who gets to make it home alive, but it's no longer you.
Give my pound of flesh, burn it till there's nothing left. Think you can handle this? Yeah, you wanna bet? Feel the pounding in my chest. Rebels feeling dangerous. Won't stop, no, I never rest till I'm victorious. I'm rising up. You're on the run. Your time is up. I'm rising, I'm rising, I'm rising. I'm golden in the Calvary. There's fire in the breath I breathe. There's nothing you can do to me. You gotta lunacy. This is a mutiny. Feel the beast inside me wave. Not much more that I can say. Time to show them what they've made. Yeah, there's no escape. I'm rising up. You're on the run. Your time is up. I'm rising, I'm rising, I'm rising. I'm golden in the Calvary. There's fire in the breath I breathe. There's nothing you can do to me. You gotta lunacy. This is a mutiny. 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 You should've known that I'd never obey. This is the price that you pay. Gloves coming up, yeah, I'm taking the reins. I'm gonna push through the pain. You should've known that I'd never obey. This is the price that you pay. Gloves coming off, yeah, I'm taking the reins. This is a mutiny.
Mutiny, this is a mutiny, 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 this is a mutiny, mutiny, this is a mutiny, mutiny, this is a mutiny,
You sure do like to share your opinions, talking big like somebody's listening. Nobody's listening. It's so fun and games until it doesn't toss me out. I'll hit the ignition. Now you listen. Hop up in the window. Smaller and smaller you fade out. Hop up in the window. You gotta get my vibe, no, there's no way. I'm flying high above all your gravity, trying to bring me down, but I'll never stay. Hey, hey, watch me levitate. You cannot get my vibe, no, there's no way. You can say what you want, call me insane, trying to bring me down, but I'll never stay. Hey, hey, watch me levitate. Watch me levitate. Hey, hey, watch me levitate. Try to paint me like a no-name, so sorry, but we're not the same. No, we're not the same. Boo-hoo, poor you, please forgive me, cause I don't feel any pity. I'm fed up with lies, you wanted my demise. Now you're watching me rise, rise, rise. Up in the window, smaller and smaller you fade out. Up in the window. You cannot get my vibe, no, there's no way. I'm flying high above all your gravity, trying to bring me down, but I'll never stay. Hey, hey, watch me levitate. You cannot get
me levitate, watch me levitate, watch me levitate, watch me levitate.
Watch me levitate. When I kill my vibe, no, there's no way. I'm flying high above all your gravity, trying to bring me down, but I'll never stay. Hey, hey, watch me levitate. When I kill my vibe, no, there's no way. You can say what you want, call me insane, trying to bring me down, but I'll never stay. Hey, hey, watch me levitate. Watch me levitate. Hey, hey, watch me levitate.
Can't face it. Just look at yourself in the mirror, you know that you're wasting. I'm praying I won't have to reveal all these things I can sit on.